And now we see everybody.
Hello. We're
Hello,
so
Wendy.
Hi.
Hello, Benjamin.
Hello, Dr. Stein. How are you?
I'm doing well. Don't Dr. Stein that. We're Brittany and Benjamin.
Every time she tells me
I'm
that.
just saying.
I mean, I don't
uh,
mind calling you Brittany. I just don't want to do it in front of everybody else. They didn't know.
Oh, okay. Well, so it's special, right? Okay.
Mhm.
You know. You
well,
know.
I'm
Mhm.
going to do your official introduction.
Perfect.
All right. Dr. Brittany Stein is a licensed health service psychologist and nationally certified school psychologist. Dr. Stein is an associate professor of psychology at Abilene Christian University. She earned her doctorate in school psychology from Oklahoma State University, focusing on early childhood and applied behavior analysis. Dr. Stein has extensive experience in rural schools, supporting federal grants, improving school climate, and supervising graduate students in school-based practicum and MTSS coaching. She has worked on numerous state and federal grants, specializing in tiered systems of support and mental health services within schools. Her research focuses on evidence-based school practices and the collaboration between school and community mental health services. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Stein.
Well, thank you for having me, Wendy. And I am so glad to see all of you here. And, Oklahoma is near and dear to my heart. Like Wendy said, in there, I was at Oklahoma State University. That's where I graduated from. And I actually recently just moved back to Texas. All of our family is in Dallas Fort Worth. And so I was telling her yesterday that it's been bittersweet. I miss Oklahoma, and I was there for 8 years after graduation, working at OSU and at the co-op out in northeastern Oklahoma. So I wish you all were here with me in my office. This is a historical building on campus. That's the nice way of saying old, but it has been painted and it smells and looks like fall, right? And what better way to kick off fall than talking about effective meetings, right?
Yay!
I know it's a small group, and I know that Benjamin has heard me present 50 million times, but I'm going to make him act excited, like he's glad to see me today. So I am going to pull up my slides, allow to share window, and hopefully this is going to work. Can you guys see?
We can.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Now when I click into slideshow, it's going to work. It's not going to go crazy on me. Can you see it still, or did it disappear?
It disappeared.
Oh, well, we're just going to have to switch that over. See, I'm glad that you guys are giving me that. That is always, oh, I got it. There we go.
Very
There we
good.
go.
Perfect.
Yay.
That is a lesson in flexibility. I teach in a different classroom for all 3 of my classes, and it is a different tech setup everywhere. So I'm practicing my generalization skills of go here and be like Gumby, be flexible, which is also important for facilitators to do when they're leading meetings. So when they asked and said, Dr. Duhan called and said, Brittany, do you have any interest in presenting on effective meetings? I said, well, yes, I do, because this is one of the key aspects of MTSS that often gets overlooked. The triangle is exciting, right? Most often my schools, I ask them if they're doing tiered supports, RTI, PBIS, MTSS. Yes, we are. We do tier 1 supports for everyone. We do tier 2 for some students, and we do tier 3 for, fewer students, and it's more individualized. We're doing tiered systems of support. I'm like, well, great, check that off the list. Do you use data? That one's a little more hit and miss, right? We use data here. Maybe we're not as effective with our data. But then when I get into systems, right? Effective teaming, looking at all these, schools are like, well, we have meetings, but do they work? are they actually a part of the MTSS process? And we're going to talk about that today. So our objectives are to identify the core components of effective meetings, discuss how to establish effective routines for these meetings, understand our responsibilities of each role during the meeting, and discuss the importance of your meeting agenda, and not just an agenda for the sake of an agenda, but an agenda for problem solving, right? And who doesn't want to feel at the end of a meeting like it was a great use of their time, right? All of us want to feel that way. So for sustainable teaming and effective meetings, we're right here on the model. Wendy, I hope that I have the most updated model on here, because this thing tends to like evolve. It's like a Pokemon, and I turn around and I'm like, I got to catch it. And it's like right out there. So in effective meetings, we talk about agenda and action plan and team member roles and responsibilities. The core components are going to be starting with the clear purpose and authority, moving into the routines and defined roles, meeting minutes, and then action planning. For this clear purpose and authority, we need to have a stated goal. What are we going to focus on, right? It's really easy to say, we're going to have data meetings and talk about data. And what does that mean? What data are we talking about? Which content area? Which groups do we have? What representation? What is the purpose? It's also important because it can be really easy to create extra meetings around the same topic. I went into schools and I would be working with them for months. We'd be on our 4th or 5th PBIS Tier 1 team meeting, have a grant, and then all of a sudden they're telling me, oh yeah, this is like something we discussed in our bullying prevention meeting. Wait, what? Or, oh yeah, but we can discuss that later in the crisis response team meeting. Wait, what? Those things tell us we need an alignment of our meeting goals, our audience, our data, the things that we're looking at. We also need to have an agreed start and stop time. This is one of those things where I always tell schools, we want to make sure that we're honoring people's times, but it's basic behavioral principles, right? My students who are my second years in my grad class graciously let me know 2 weeks ago that I was the only professor that started on time, right at 9 o'clock. And we had a discussion how they had figured out that their previous professors didn't start class until 9:10, so they didn't show up until 9:10, right? Because that's what they learned. It's going to be the same way in the schools. Everybody knows, if the principal doesn't start the faculty meeting right on time, they're going to mosey on in. Same way, if your meetings last too long, and I had a team out in northeastern Oklahoma, small school, like they loved each other, but we had to start working on the fact that we cannot have a 2-hour meeting after school when it's supposed to be a 1 hour, because people are going to stop showing up. They're going to say, well, that always turns into 2 hours and we're not as efficient. So start and stop time, and then meeting expectations. Different schools have different cultures in terms of how, we always recommend being more explicit, but in the way this is presented, some schools feel comfortable putting it on the agenda. Some have a discussion as a team of what do we want our expectations to look like. Other schools, because of the climate, really need their admin to help with setting the expectations and be that backup along with the facilitator. But just having them in, I'm not going to have side conversations. We're going to be prepared, use our technology. I like to approach from the psychologist perspective of, do you know that there's no such thing as multitasking? So if we focus on these tasks together, we can problem solve better and we can get done sooner. So with those expectations, we can set the tone in several ways. There's the warm welcome, right? We tell schools, teachers all the time, let's do teacher greetings at the door, right? For those of you that don't know, that research, actually, Dr. Alday's research, it came out of Oklahoma State University. So those initial studies that show the power of that, they were done in our state. which means that we should be using them all the more. Same thing in our meetings. Let's do a warm welcome. Who did something fun this weekend? Who has an unusual talent? Then optimistic closure. I've seen this done with quotes, with a good story or reflection. And one thing that I love are my example of it is Stein shout outs, but really it's behavior specific praise, positive reinforcement, where I used to call out my grad students in our Bridge Center meetings of, this is something that I saw that was really great this week. And it's a way to improve the environment, but also to teach the others, this is what we're looking for. These are some great things that I saw. And so those are some ideas for setting the tone. But now we need to get into the nitty gritty. And I realize I could probably talk about this topic. And in fact, I have talked about this topic for a good half a day doing trainings. So I know I only have 30 minutes. So I'm going to condense it down, and it's going to feel fast and furious if it doesn't already. But one of the most important takeaways when you're working as a team, if you are the coach or if you're the internal facilitator or coach, is getting people to understand that the meeting isn't the only phase. We have a before phase and an after phase, and that before and after really determines a lot of the success of what happens during the meeting. So during the meeting is when we're participating, problem solving, planning. I know you like the alliterations. Beforehand, we're going to have our agenda, have our plan, and we're going to curate that data. Be really intentional where it's not taking us, 30 minutes of the meeting to pull and click through the map or the star scores to find what we need. We're going to have it curated, and I found screenshots on a slideshow work sometimes, a paper printout. It really depends on what we're looking at, but have it curated. And then afterwards, we have the documentation. We're going to send it out to all the necessary parties. And most importantly, we're going to do the tasks, right? So prep, problem solve, actually do it. Inside this meeting, you need to have defined roles. Schools push back on this so much. And my sweet dear admin always want to be the facilitator because let's be real, they're the boss, right? They're used to taking charge and taking that role. But that facilitator role, we highly encourage to be a different individual. It could be the school counselor, school psychologist, social worker, reading specialist, MTSS coach. If you have one of those in your building, that would be the ideal one. The facilitator is someone besides the administrator. Data analyst is the person who is going to be your data guru. When I'm in a training, I say, who loves math? Who loves data the most? Okay, you're looking probably at your data analyst. If you get excited at the prospect of creating pie graphs and bar charts, you're our person. The note taker. The note taker is usually my person who initially volunteers for it, is the person that thinks they get to be quiet the whole meeting. And oftentimes they're really disappointed to find out that the note taker has the really important job of redirecting us to be on track and to go back to the agenda. Yes, the facilitator is facilitating it, but the note taker is the one saying, oh, but who's responsible for that? Oh, wait, I didn't get this part. When is that going to be due by? And then the team member is everyone else. I do not have it on here, but every team knows the person who hates being there the most, right? Like I can ask a team and say, who wants to be here the least? Think of the person in here. They know, and I tell them, that's your timekeeper. Timekeeper isn't on there, but the timekeeper is going to be the person who wants to be there least, and they will keep things flowing. So be the facilitator before the meeting. They're prompting for items, providing items to the note taker, and during they're managing that flow. It's essential that they have that problem solving mantra, right? The model, I have been testing all of my classes on the problem solving model and have told them, if you can say it back to me once all of us get it, I'm buying you a Sonic drink, right? We want our teams to be the same way, where they can say those problem solving stages right like that. And your facilitator, even more so, needs to be able to orient everyone to that process so we don't make cardiac decisions, so we don't get swayed by emotions or venting or problem admiration. They're active and they make sure that we have the next date and time communicated. The note taker is collecting those items from the facilitator, prepping the agenda. That is a skill. If you are a coach, you are working with that note taker on how to fill it out. Guys, let me tell you that I have tweaked and made several variations of these meeting agendas. Every time people are like, that's too complicated, I just want to fill out like a Google Doc. That's because these meeting agendas, they are not meant to be just picked up and ran with. They need training and they need that time. And the best way to do that is have someone sit side by side with you in a meeting. Do the prep and then have someone say, as a coach, I would always sit by my note taker and say, okay, did you get that? And then I take the notes and they take the notes. And then we compare them at the end to see if we got the same thing, right? So the note taker during the meeting is recording those notes, asking for clarification, actively participating, and afterwards cleaning up those meeting minutes, right? You've got that note taker that is like a scribe. Don't be the scribe, right? Don't write down every single word. This is not a courtroom, is what I tell them. You do not have to have every single little conversation. It's hitting the highlights, and that is a skill. Unfortunately, it's not one that's readily taught in colleges. I'm on a mission to change that here, how to take effective notes, but it is a critical skill. And then they're going to disseminate them. Best practice is, I've seen ranges from 28 to 48 or 24 to 48 hours. I would often tell my grad students 36 hours, but figuring out a process for that. Should we just leave our meeting minutes in the Google folder? You can, but more often than not, people will not check the to-do list. I recommend sending an email and copying and pasting the to-do list items in the body of the email. That's the way to get it done. Your data analyst, they're reviewing, organizing the data for the previous problems, for new problems, prepping graphs, talking with the facilitator about the new problems. They're leading discussion of the data. They can produce additional data on request, but they're ready, right? And so that is an important role. And really, if it's not prepared beforehand, it's going to take a lot of your time, and it's going to mean that you can focus on fewer, or you can't focus on as many students. So that is the benefit of actually spending the time as a data analyst beforehand and prepping it. The team member, you're all going to recommend agenda items. Everyone's going to look at the data together. This is the part, again, it's very unique to the team solving process, which if you are just, this is like your jam, you're so excited, you want to have an effective meetings party with me later, write down team initiated problem solving, and you can go down the tips rabbit hole. And that research, that grant is all on effective meetings, right? They have fidelity checks, all kinds of things, everything you can think of effective meetings. And one of the great things is that it is clearly defined in your agenda that we are going to look at new problems, right? What's coming up? What is the data showing? We're precisely defining what the problem looks like and selecting solutions. Oh, and getting a goal and a timeline to follow up. And then in next meetings, we're actually following up. This is the breakdown with so many schools in MTSS. They are using the screening data, identifying kids who need future supports, but they never come back to actually see, did we do the solution plan that we put in place, right? And in these effective meetings, we're not getting distracted to vent, to talk about, Gary and his constant off-task behavior, right? I'm going to call out Dr. Duhan, use his name. His constant off-task behavior and how this happened to his parents and this happened the other day, because we've got to discuss our follow-up on the problems from last time. And did our plan actually work? And do we need to tweak it? And afterwards, Everyone's going to do their action steps, their to-do list items. And the great thing about the way the agenda is set up is they know we're going to follow up and ask, did these to-do list items get done? It's that accountability. So I typically do a check for understanding. You guys are welcome to come off mute, right? We can go through and I'm going to ask you which role goes, who's responsible for this in the meeting. So who should be reserving the room? It's okay. Facilitator. Recruiting agenda items. Facilitator. Review data prior to meeting. Data analyst. Reserve and set up projector and or computer for the meeting. Note taker. Keep discussion focused. That's your facilitator. And record topics and decisions on the agenda in minutes. It's your note taker. Ensure problems are defined with precision. Schools always guess wrong on this. They always say, it's the data analyst. No, it's everybody's job, right? All the team members. Next, ensure solutions have defined goals and plans to monitor fidelity. Team member, all. Provide additional data during discussion as requested. That's your data analyst. End on time. This is going to say facilitator if you don't have a timekeeper, but that's where I say put your timekeeper. And prepare minutes and send to all members is going to be your note taker, right? Everybody has roles. This keeps your internal coach or your admin from taking over and doing it all, okay? Ideally, you have a backup person assigned to each of the roles, right? And you're cross-training on when to do the different things. But I'm telling you, it doesn't really matter anecdotally what I say. There's a lot of research also, data and outcomes, that having assigned roles, doing these effective meeting processes doesn't just improve the perceptions of the effectiveness of the meeting for the attendees, it improves student outcomes, right? Because we're actually planning interventions and we're adjusting when they don't work. So that magical meeting agenda, which I keep talking about, it's important because it defines what we're going to talk about, right? It clarifies the time and it guides our database decision-making process, okay? MTSS, and I will say this all over, I joke with people that I'm just like spreading the gospel of MTSS. So this is one of my soapbox points. Like I will say this until I die. MTSS is so much more than the triangle. It is not just the practices. It's the data, which like circle of the problem solving model. And it's the effective system to use the data to drive the instruction, right? So it's like the system for the data to happen to drive the decisions of the tiers. This is where that happens. We're going to organize our time. It can't happen if we don't have the right prioritization or time spent on it. I can have a beautiful life plan of all of the goals that I'm going to achieve, but if I don't prioritize, right, I'm going to get caught up on answering my emails and never get to writing my book, right? Same thing in our data meetings. We could spend all day talking about designing the posters, or honestly, I've seen so many schools, we spend all day coming up with cute reward ideas for the cleanest classroom. But when it comes time to look at our office discipline referrals month by month in a rate and figure out what we need to change about the way we do business in our school, that's what's got to be prioritized. And it's less fun to talk about. So we need to put it on our agenda. It's fun for some of us to talk about, maybe not others. We're making sure we're looking at the old problems and the new ones. And at the end, we're assessing, was this meeting effective or not? Now, I had schools, as recently as this summer, give some feedback on, do we really think this is a good use of time, even assessing the effectiveness of meetings, right? And we'll talk about a little bit later, like what that looks like and why it's important. And afterwards, our agenda, it's a record for review and it's our task guide in between. So it serves as the guide for all 3 phases. And if you can get your team to start thinking of the process in terms of that before, during, after, it will really help with the flow of actually getting things done versus we're just going to show up to the meeting and then I'm going to have, so many sleeps before the next month's meeting and I'll never think about it again. People aren't tired from solving problems. What are they tired from? Solving the same problem over and over again, right? I'm not tired of trying to ask my roommate to clean the house and figure out a solution and come up with a chore chart once, right? I get tired when it's a week later and the house still isn't clean and now I'm trying a new solution, or now I'm asking them to do it again, or it's still a problem 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, right? So, people get frustrated when we come to the October meeting and it's, wow, the playground is out of control. Like those kids, they are crazy. We should really do something about it. And then November, oh, no, we didn't do anything about it. You know what? Let's teach expectations. Oh, but it's already basically Thanksgiving break. And then December, we're still having fights and issues on the playground. What could we do? You know what? I think we said that we could add aids or maybe teach some expectations. Yeah, we should remember to do that. That's where the frustration lies. So this lovely problem-solving model, which if you have not seen it before, I wish that we had all the time to go through it, but this is the heart of what is happening during that problem-solving agenda. When I kept doing this of using data, that's what I was imagining, going through all of those phases. And it's going to occur inside of our agenda. So oftentimes, our goal, right? I said we're tired of solving the same problems over and over again. So our goal in a meeting is to figure out solutions, right? We want solutions to what the needs are of our students. Let's match some resources to needs. So we have our meeting and typically, quite often we run out of time, right? If we don't come in with an agenda and we're just sitting here to talk, we could get distracted. There's an emergency. This happens. So you know what? Let's use data. This is a lot of your schools. They're like, I've got so much data. I have end of school year data. We have a climate survey. We have this. We do this. These teachers do literacy first and dibbles and MAP. And we got a grant to do these 5 things. So much data. We're swimming in it. Okay, you've got the data. We start to pull it up. And now we're going to look at this data, and now this data, and do a deep dive into this individual student. And we're out of time, right? Let's try an agenda instead, right? Let's just have an agenda of what we're going to talk through, okay? And the agenda says something like, let's look at reading concerns. Oh, but do we really know? Wait, what was Jimmy's score on that? Wait, what level is Jimmy at? We actually don't know his comparison to his peers. We think he's not okay. Well, but what about Susie and Jimmy? We're out of time, right? And so you've got to have both the agenda and the data to actually go from the problem to the solution, right? Both are critical to keep you focused and keep you there. Your task list versus your agenda. Whenever I introduce this problem-solving agenda, which comes from the original TIPS agenda, which I was trained on the original TIPS agenda. It's what Dr. Rich and I used when we were in Philly working at the center, the Devereaux Center for Effective Schools. And it was just really overwhelming, right? And a lot of times when people see a task list and then see an agenda they're supposed to take notes on, they're like, why would we have both of these parts? But really, you want a check-in, to-do list. Here's what we're putting here. And the agenda is the planning and discussion period. Okay, so you're not really making decisions on the task list. It's a, did we do this? Who's responsible? That. The agenda is we're working through it. We're having conversation on those aspects. So don't make the mistake of taking 30 minutes of your meeting to talk about the task list. If somebody has a question, they should be submitting that to be on the agenda so the appropriate amount of time is allotted. Ask me how I know that's a problem, because it happened in a million of my meetings, right? Where we spent 15 minutes talking about someone's inability to contact, community members to get rewards for the ticket system. So be intentional, and you got to stay strong. Our flow of the agenda is going to start with calling the meeting to order, reviewing the to-do list from last time. We're going to mark, is it not started? Is it in progress? Is it completed? Each item. Then we move through the agenda item. Oh, that was fancy for you. I still have no idea how to create those reactions. Did you guys see the balloons that just came? That was interesting. Teams was not showing it. So the agenda items, there's the action plan and next steps, and then the previous problem and new problems, and then we're going to evaluate at the end. So a sample meeting agenda, this is the Bridge Center meeting agenda. It looks very similar to the State Department, all blue one that matches for sustainable teaming. You're going to have today's meeting, next meeting, the roles in the team member, and then each of the team members name present and put check marks. It can really overwhelm people that this sample meeting agenda is in Google Sheets. I tell people the reason I do it in Sheets is because you can make one workbook and then a tab for each meeting. So we're not having to send links out for every single Google Doc, right? But some people feel more comfortable the other way. And as long as you're covering all the aspects, that's okay. But really, if you can get trained on it, it's the best. Review the to-do list. So we've got our task. We've got the person responsible, the deadline. Was it not started? Is it in progress? Is it complete? The note taker is adding to this to-do list as we go. So the first little bit is we're going through the to-do list, checking, did this happen? Did this not happen? There's a little bit more time allotted in this one for the beginning. But then as the meeting goes on, the note taker is adding, okay, Benjamin is going to go, he's going to work with the second grade teachers on reteaching classroom expectations, right? Wendy is going to meet with the community members to ask their input on our behavioral expectations. For the agenda items, we're always going to review our action plan and determine next steps. That's where our site goals are, where are we at. And then we're going to look at if you have a problem solving worksheet, which I know the Bridge Center provides, we're going to go through that. Update status, review any new data. There are some examples in here. And depending on which type of meeting it is, you're going to be looking at maybe a tier 2 and 3 problem solving sheet, or looking at integrating tier 1 data for group-wide decision making. Make sure you've got those database decision-making rules set in stone before you start analyzing data. Otherwise, it's going to take you forever to go through. And then at the end, we're going to evaluate the meeting. So was it a good use of our time? And I usually have people do a thumbs up, side to side, or a down if it's not work, or if it didn't work. And the reason why I do this is because it's so easy for people to be frustrated and then just go to the teacher's lounge and talk about what a waste that was. We should have done this. And this gives people the opportunity to voice their concerns. You can also, so we were talking about individuals from different backgrounds who may or may not feel comfortable speaking out in the meeting. I think as the facilitator, that's your job to say, if any of you have a concern or feel like, it wasn't useful, like, please come talk to me afterwards and let's talk about how to problem solve, or maybe I can explain something differently. Because what you don't want is, again, that teacher's lounge conversation happening and then it undermining the system, right? Or the teaming and the practices, because, well, those are just a waste of time. Who cares about MTSS? Wow, we're not getting paid for those meetings anymore because the grant money ran out. That's so silly, all of those things. So it gives everyone a voice and just that initial gut check. And if something's not working, you can problem solve in the moment, like, oh, we didn't spend enough time on this, or we didn't even address this point. So, and you can always change the questions if they don't fit for the particular meeting. So I'm not going to play this in here, but I will provide Wendy with the links. Whenever I said I wasn't gonna play it. Whenever I do a training on effective meetings, it's always helpful to have examples, right? We want examples and non-examples. Most schools have never watched an ideal team meeting, right? An effective data team meeting, a tier 1 meeting. They don't even know what a tier 1 meeting really means to discuss school-wide data. So we're talking about it and we're trying to give them agendas and handing things, but until they see the efficiency of looking at the data, everybody has roles, how it's working, right? Sometimes they're not bought in. So something that I have always done as a coach and a trainer is I will show an example video, right? A tier 1, a tier 2 and 3, depending on the site that I'm working with. And then we do an activity, and I want to share this with you guys today. You're able to, take it to whoever you're working with or your team, schools, that will watch an effective meeting example, reflect on the video, and then discuss these questions. What is our goal for each of our current team meetings? Whether we call it an MTSS meeting, a tier 1, a student leadership meeting, our data review, so many meetings, which, by the way, if they have not done an inventory of all of their meetings, highly recommend that. Write down, what are all our meetings? What's the goal? What sort of data are we looking at? All those things. Meeting inventory. Brilliant. Are we meeting our goals? Are these meetings effective uses of our time with the goals we've set out? Do we have meetings that overlap in purpose? Just like I talked about the bullying prevention and the tier 1 behavior team, where we found we were trying to problem solve a lot of the things, and we could be integrating, braiding funds, right? All of those things we like. Do we have representative stakeholders, or the people we need across meetings, right? A lot of our fidelity assessments measure or talk about having people, your parent rep, all of those, your parent rep, or there might be teams on a community or a board member that are present, but doing a check of that. Is there an administrator at all meetings, right? We know how important it is for leadership to be able to allocate resources and to promote buy-in. Are there things that we do not have meetings for, but we need meetings to discuss? Are we having hallway conversations, or 1 or 2 people are solving a problem when really it should be a team? And what could we do to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our meetings? That's a PLC or a teaming all in of itself, guys. Watch the video and then go through those questions, right? I just handed it to you. It's good. So I know that our time is almost up. There are 5 minutes. I wanted to be available for questions or anything else. So I have this up here, and I left it. It's the old presentation. That was my OK State, but I'll put in the chat my ACU email. But you can also reach out to Gary and Sarah at the Bridge Center. So, and I'll put my current one in here. Oh, I see a thank you. You're welcome. Any questions? If you're bored, Benjamin and I can just entertain you. We have a whole going routine. We've been buddies for a while, right?
We have been buddies for a long time now.
No.
Well, we appreciate you being here and presenting effective meetings. I learned a lot, and her presentation will be available on the module, the implementation of MTS year 1 under our community of practices. Our next community of practice will be October 30th with Stephanie Beasley from Bixby Public Schools, and she will be talking about auditing and organizing MTSS resources. So we hope to see you then. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Miss Dr. Stein, you were
Yes.
amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You were
You're so
great.
sweet.
And I really appreciate everything you said. I mean, it's not like I haven't heard this a billion times, but coming from project manager for ESSEP, I think it kind of opened my eyes to how can we maximize our meetings with our schools in the same light. Giving them that agenda ahead of time, getting them that chance to kind of collect that data so that when our meetings aren't just blowing by really quick, we can really kind of dive into the meat. And then, under like one of my conversations with the school was like, like even though after we meet, there's still something like you guys have to do, like you guys have to meet again to then, have to facilitate and having that whole conversation and the way you kind of presented everything, and it was very helpful. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
You made my day, Jasmine. Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys
You're
for letting me
welcome.
come with you.
And Yasmin is the one we got from Texas I was telling you about, that you all did the switch,
We traded.
the switcheroo.
You came here or you came up there and I came down here and it's good, right?
Yeah, I do like Oklahoma. I do. Look, I just left the DF Dub, so
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm hoping our paths will cross soon. I'm sure there will be other.
I'm sure there will.
We'll keep roping you back in.
Thanks, Wendy.
You know.
I like that.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Building escape.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
day.
See you, Brittany.